Welcome to Discourse Politics, everybody. Today is my final election prediction day. So first, we're going to make a prediction on the popular vote, and then we're going to go state by state, and I'm going to give you exactly which way I think the state's going to vote, why I think that way, and what is the number of vote totals, or how many votes that the candidate that's going to win each state wins by, and by what percent. Before I forget, the spreadsheet that we're going over, you can find a link in the description below to the public Google folder and get a copy. This spreadsheet that I'm going over is called Election Prediction Final. So you can find it on there, make your own predictions, put in your own assumptions, and output a number. So without further ado, let's get into it. So first things first, I want to start off with the whole thesis of basically the past 3 weeks of my videos. What have they been? So the thesis has basically been that polling errors in 2016 were the direct result of non-response bias and social desirability bias. Then I say that those mistakes are even worse this election. I have at least an hour and 20 minutes worth of videos about polling if you want to see why I think polling is still broken, but they keep claiming that they adjusted for education and that's going to magically fix the 2016 polls. When APOR put out that recommendation, which APOR is the American Association of Public Opinion Research, which represents polling firms, when they put out the idea that they could adjust for education, some polling firms actually went back and redid their data, and they still produced, on average, in swing states, Hillary Clinton winning by 4 to 6 percentage points. So even adjusting for education didn't fix that. And it's mainly because there's something about Donald Trump that people don't want to admit that they're voting for Donald Trump, but secretly they like the guy. Then we go on to current polls. For example, the YouGov poll, which shows Biden with that's ahead by 11%, also showed that 64% of his base has already cast a vote, which then goes on to, based on current vote totals, either the level of support for Biden is overestimated or people are not being honest about percent of support that they already voted. It would stand to reason that it is much more likely that people are not being honest about who they support than whether or not they have already voted for their preferred candidate. It's much more likely that people are lying or fibbing about who they're supporting or not even answering the phone. But then when asked the question, have you already cast your vote, they're much less likely to lie about that. And because they're much less likely to lie about that, we can extrapolate how many votes each candidate is going to get. Using that extrapolation and the fact that overwhelmingly Trump is expected to get 2-to-1 votes on election day, then it stands to reason that Trump is going to win based on how many votes are still left outstanding. One caveat that I wanted to put in here is that approximately 33 million mail-in votes have not been cast yet. So that is, in a nutshell, the basic thesis of the videos that I've been putting out for the last 3 weeks. So now that you understand that, let me make my prediction. I think that this year there's going to be at least 145 million votes for the general election. And that means that based upon how many people have already voted early and absentee, that there is expected to be about 60 million votes left. Now, of that 60 million, some of them are still going to be mail-in votes that are coming in late. So because of that, even though on election day, I think Donald Trump is going to get a 2-to-1 vote on election day, some of those mail-in ballots are going to come in. And so it's going to look like on election day, something more like 45% Biden, 55% Trump. So instead of it being 66% to 33%, I made that adjustment based upon how many votes are out on election day. And I'm still giving Joe Biden 70% of the unaffiliated voters that have voted so far, which is a historic lean, but I went ahead and did it anyway to help reflect that Joe Biden did get a lot more early votes. Even then, even giving 70% of Biden's unaffiliated voters and not giving Trump a 2-to-1 margin on expected election day turnout, based upon that, I have to conclude that Donald Trump is going to win the popular vote. And I can't believe I'm saying this because I'll be honest with you. Of all the things that I was going to predict in 2020, Trump winning the popular vote was not it. But based upon the math, based upon the polling, based upon who said they've already voted and who said they're going to vote on election day, it would stand to reason that Donald Trump should win the popular vote by about 2 million votes. So I have him winning the popular vote by 2.2 million votes, which is 1.54%. So now that we got the popular vote out of the way, let's go state by state and look at some of the assumptions that I've made and sort of the results that I think is going to happen. So originally I had Biden's election day turnout was going to be 33.3%. and Trump's election day turnout was going to be 66.7. I've adjusted that for some states because some states it looks like Biden hasn't cannibalized his vote completely, but in other states it looks definitely like he's cannibalized his vote. So just by and large, I'm leaving it at 33.3 to 66.7, but you can adjust those how you want. So with respect to Arizona, here's what I think is happening. I gave Joe Biden 65% that's unaffiliated and currently voted. Donald Trump has a slight lead and a slight turnout in voters that could be affiliated with either party. So he has about a 10,000 or 11,000 vote lead with them. But when you give Joe Biden 65%, that means that right now it looks like Biden would have a lead of about 36,000 votes, maybe 40,000 votes, right? But what that means is there's about 392,000 votes outstanding, based upon the fact that there's probably going to be about 2.7 to 2.8 million votes in Arizona. So given that there's that much outstanding and the fact that I think that only 10% more of the mail-in ballots are expected, for the record, they sent every registered voter a mail-in ballot. So it's presumable that this is going to be a state with a high amount of not returned ballots, so to speak. That would mean that on election day, there's expected to be 284,000 votes, give or take, which means that Biden would be expected to get about 95,000 votes, Trump expected to get about 190,000 votes. So the final vote for Biden is going to be about 1.368 million, and for Trump it's going to be 1.4 million, which means that Trump is going to win by 1.5% or 41,694 votes. Same thing, I gave Biden 65% of these unaffiliated voters, which basically gives him 100,000 vote lead as of now. Right now, of the voters that you can classify or that are easy to classify based upon the scoring model of Target Smart, Trump actually has turned out his base slightly more. And keep in mind, in 2016, Trump had a 220,000 vote deficit to make up on election day. This time, he's only got about 105,000, if that. Anyway, giving Joe Biden 65% of this unaffiliated vote, it means that he's ahead by about 105,545 votes as we speak. I went ahead and put in that 50% of the mail-in ballot that's left out, which is about 1.4 million. I'm projecting that 50% of those are going to come in and that it's going to go Biden pretty heavy, not as heavy as it was in the beginning, which was about 70-30 or 65-35, but 58-42. And so that's going to give Biden another 410,000 votes and Trump another 300,000 votes, which leaves then on election day, at least 1 million people are going to turn out. And of those 1 million people, 333,000 are going to vote for Biden, 667,000 are going to vote for Trump, which means then Trump would win the state by 1.13%, 115,192 votes. So next is Michigan. I did the same breakout as, unaffiliated voters going 65% to 35%. There's really not that many mail-in ballots remaining in Michigan. There's about 650,000. I went ahead and said that 50% of those are going to magically appear between now and the time they count the ballots, which I think would be really high, but nonetheless. And so that would give Biden another 187,000 votes to Trump, 135,000 with this kind of breakout. For Michigan, I put that the turnout is going to be 60-40. I didn't quite make it 2-1. And that's just because, based upon the fact that there's only 55% of the vote in, I think that Democrats have cannibalized less of their vote in the state of Michigan. So therefore, they'd have a higher election day turnout. Just my thoughts. One thing that you might want to do if you're leaning towards Biden is maybe give him more of the unaffiliated votes, maybe do higher of the percent mail-in remaining ballots. But probably the easiest thing you could do is to assume that maybe something like 45% to 55% is coming out on election day, which wouldn't be too far-fetched in a lot of these swing states, just for the record. And if you do that, you kind of see something that's more in alignment with what could happen with a good Joe Biden victory. But I don't see it. I don't see this level of turnout for Joe Biden on election day based upon all the other polls that we've seen. A lot of Trump supporters have been waiting for election day to vote. Biden supporters tended to vote early. So if they've made it this far, I don't think it's inconceivable to have 1.5 to 1. I'm not even looking for a 2-1 margin, which is what is supposed to happen, but I'm doing a 1.5 to 1. So 40 to 60 is where I ended up, and I think Trump's going to carry the state by 1.5%. 76,725 votes. So now North Carolina. North Carolina has an interesting dynamic in which that it is a state in which there are a lot more registered Democrats than Republicans. So it is harder to allocate the unaffiliated votes. I didn't think it was right to allocate the votes 65-35 for Biden over Trump in North Carolina, particularly simply because in North Carolina, it's a free for all. So just based upon how North Carolina acts historically, I think it's closer to more like 55-45 that those unaffiliated voters would go for Biden over Trump. It wouldn't be as large of a margin as the other states. I went ahead and put 25% of the mail-in votes left expected to turn out. I could probably raise that up a little bit. And the reason I put that is because there was such a historic in-person early vote that I'm not sure if they fully accounted for some of these mail-in ballots. People actually went and physically voted. If they did, then this number should be higher. If they didn't, then I'm just leaving it at 25%, which I still think would be a lot, considering we're going to count the votes in less than 36 hours, and that ballot has to be in the next 36 hours. So while we're talking about that, same thing with Florida. I'm saying 50% are going to be in. 50% of these ballots have to be in the next 36 hours. 56% of the remaining mail-in ballots, which is 1.4 million. If that doesn't happen, and there's not a good split for Joe Biden, this isn't even close. This is an underestimation of how Trump is going to overperform, which in all honesty, I'm going to say this now, I am giving what I think is the low estimates for Donald Trump. I think these are his bottom numbers. I don't think Joe Biden's going to overperform what I'm giving him here, which is 65% of the unaffiliated voters, that 50% of the remaining ballots are going to come in, and 58% that are left for Biden, it's going to go 58-42 of those 50% remaining mail-in ballots that are going to come in. I think in all honesty, I think I'm overestimating Joe Biden. I wanted to give conservative estimates. I really do think this is Donald Trump's floor. So that's just my opinion. Anyway, so back to North Carolina. So right now, I would estimate that Biden's lead is somewhere in the neighborhood of 67,000, maybe 100,000 votes. And right now, 87% of the vote is in. That's projected. Now, keep in mind, there was 4.7 million votes in 2016. I'm projecting there's going to be about 5.1 million votes in 2020, which means there's still about 667,000 votes outstanding. 25% of these remaining mail-in ballots come in, and they have that split that I projected. 76,000 of them are going to go for Biden. 55,000 are going to go for Trump, which means that on Election Day, there's going to be about 535,000 people. Biden's Election Day turnout is expected to be 170,000 voters. Trump's expected Election Day turnout is 357,000, which would mean that Donald Trump's going to win by 89,769 votes, or 1.75%. I truly believe I'm underestimating Donald Trump in North Carolina. I think he's going to win by more like 3%. More like 2 to 3%. I think his chances of having over 2% are higher than his chances of being under 2%. Let me put it that way. But nonetheless, I think these numbers that I put in here generally make sense. So I'm just going to stick with them because this is the model I've been using the whole time. Pennsylvania. So Pennsylvania has had a very, very low turnout compared to every other state that we've talked about. Now, the number one reason is because, by and large, Pennsylvania doesn't vote early. They never have. They never really were good at early voting. They just never did it. But the truth is that I think a lot of people in Pennsylvania were withholding their vote because they were trying to figure out whether or not they wanted to vote for Biden. Because on the one hand, you have Donald Trump, who may not be the most likable person if you don't already like him. And then you have Joe Biden, who's much more of like a even-keeled Mr. Rogers character, even though he has a temper. He's kind of an even-keeled Mr. Rogers character that I think people want. But then you have to ask yourself the question, Pennsylvania is a high-energy state. A lot of the jobs depend on the energy sector. And when Joe Biden says he's going to work out fossil fuels, I think that scared a lot of voters. And I think that scared a lot of voters so much so that they withheld their vote, and that an overwhelming majority of people who were sure they were going to vote for Biden have already come out. I think they cannibalized their Election Day turnout vote. I think there's probably another 1.6 million votes in Pennsylvania left for Biden, which means that the turnout on Election Day is going to be somewhere around 37% Biden, 63% Donald Trump. And I think at the end of the day, when there's 6.6 million votes that are going to be cast in the state of Pennsylvania, I think Donald Trump is going to end up on Election Day getting something like 2.5 million votes on Election Day. And therefore, he's going to win by 161,737 votes, which means he's going to win by 2.43% in Pennsylvania is my estimation. And finally, the state of Wisconsin. I gave Joe Biden, again, 65% of the unaffiliated voters. So by doing that, I gave Joe Biden a 151,000 vote lead as of today in the state of Wisconsin. I think that that's probably too high. I think, given the turnout model, I think that's fine to go ahead and overestimate Joe Biden's support right now and then underestimate Trump because he's supposed to have a 2-to-1 election day turnout. I'm just going to assume it's going to be more of a 1.5 to 1 election day turnout. So what that means is, at the end of the day, even though Biden's ahead by 151,000 votes by my projection, that only 57% of the vote is in. And that means that, even if 50% of the remaining ballots, mail-in ballots, which, by the way, there's only 185,000 that are outstanding, and they go for Biden 58% to 42%, that still leaves 1.28 million on election day turnout. Biden's expected to get, 515,398 of those votes. Trump is expected to get 773 based upon my turnout projection models, which would mean that my final combined vote is 1.56 million for Biden and 1.65 million for Trump, which means Trump's going to win the state of Wisconsin by 91,578 votes, 2.85%. Now, as always, not always, but sometimes I forget, but let's talk about, holes in the theory. The first one is election day turnout is being way overestimated for Donald Trump. And the way that could manifest itself, and here's one way that could logically happen. Let's say that 10% of voters who are likely Trump voters that lie to pollsters that they've supposedly narrowed down and captured that this could be a potential thing, that as high as 10.3% of Trump supporters are lying to pollsters and saying they're voting for Biden. If that's true, then we can actually extract from those YouGov numbers. So approximately 10% of the people who said they were going to vote Republican actually said they were going to vote for Biden. So there's, I think, 550 people in that survey that said they were going to vote for Trump. So take that times 10. So there's 55 more voters that said they were going to vote for Biden that are actually going to vote for Trump. When you do that, what ends up happening is you end up lowering Biden's support by about 5%, which I think makes sense. It should be somewhere around 5 or 6% if it's true. And then if those people said that they not only are voting for Biden, but they voted early, then it would also throw off the election day turnout. And the way it would manifest itself is that group that has said that they're going to come out and vote on, or they've already voted, or 60% instead of 65% of Biden supporters have already voted, and there's still another 40% to come out. And then on the other side, the people who said that they've already voted for Biden, what they really meant was what they really meant is they've already voted for Trump. And if they've already voted for Trump, then his level of support isn't 41% or 42% that have voted for Trump. It's more like 50% of his support has voted for Trump. And when you do that, you actually start to get more realistic numbers when you play with the model. So it might be the case that 10% of the people who said they're voting for Biden have already voted for Trump and are lying. And if that's the case, that's actually good. That's a good thing for Biden, believe it or not, because then the polls would line up closer to something like Joe Biden wins the popular vote by 4 or 5%. So let me just say this. If Biden wins the popular vote by about 4 or 5%, that's probably what happened, is simply that about 10% of Trump's support did what they said they were going to do, which is they lied to pollsters and said they were voting Biden. And that manifested itself in a higher percent saying that they've already voted for Biden, a lower percent saying they voted for Trump. But the actual turnout on election day is going to be something closer to like 45, 55. And if that's the case, if the election day turnout is closer to 45, 55, then that's probably something that happened. And Joe Biden's going to slightly win a majority of these swing states, if not all of them. And he's going to win the popular vote by about 4.5 to 5%. That's one plausible way that this could be wrong. The other is I'm relying heavily on Target Smart to allocate these votes. It is completely possible, and I think there's a guy in the comments who's been making a lot of comments who I like. His name's, I think, M. Forger. They would have to have underestimated or overestimated Trump support with 65-plus-year-olds. And, that's, I guess, a possibility. But they would have to have overestimated something for Trump and underestimated something for Biden significantly, so that these numbers are not even close to accurate. So we're already starting from a base of incorrectness. So how that would manifest itself in overall projections is, this number is not even, these numbers aren't even close. It really should be like Biden 42, Trump 25 million. And when you do that, then the models start making a little bit more sense. That being said, I highly doubt it. The turnout among white working class men in a lot of these swing states is really high. I honestly can't remember which state I was looking at, but it was like middle-aged white males, first time or infrequent voters, was extremely high it was either like Wisconsin or Michigan. So I don't think these voters are coming out of the woodwork to vote for Joe Biden. He's not that inspiring. And the fact that Trump has registered a lot of these voters, the fact that he is in almost every swing state, he's out-registered Democrats by tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands in each of the swing states, not just overall, but each of the swing states. It means that they found these voters. They've unearthed these voters. And a lot of infrequent and first-time voters, it looks like, are voting for Donald Trump and keeping him in this race. And if there is a suppressed African-American turnout, as there is expected to be, because Joe Biden's not too well liked in the African-American community, if Donald Trump gets about 15% of the African-American vote, if Donald Trump gets 35 to 40% of the Latino vote, when he only got 33% in 2016, all those numbers make up for all the supposed suburban voters that Donald Trump has lost. And then if that number is incorrect, then what we're going to see is a landslide on election night. And the reason that is because right now, all the polls are indicating that Donald Trump lost 3 support groups. And that is, he lost some of the support among white working class, which doesn't look like it's the case, but that's what they keep saying. He lost suburban white women, which was supposedly true in 2016, that Hillary Clinton had the women vote locked up, but that's not how Election Day turned out. And number 3, he lost the elderly vote. If that's true, there's no way he can win this election. But that's not really what we're seeing turn out in the voting numbers. That's not what we're seeing in some of the exit polling that's been released. And when you have Democrats in Miami-Dade County and you have Democrats in Philadelphia imploring the Biden campaign to do something because their get out the vote operation, which didn't exist, by the way, and in my top 10 reasons why Donald Trump's going to win the election, one of them was that Biden decided not to run a ground game. He decided not to get a get out the vote effort. And by doing that, I think he might have screwed himself. In the comment section below, put your predictions. At least put who do you think is going to win the popular vote and who do you think is going to win each state. It'd be awesome if you'd put in by how many votes or at least what the percentage is going to be. Like, is Donald Trump going to win Arizona by 1% or is he going to lose Arizona by 3%? Whatever it is, it'd be kind of cool to see. Just to get a sort of feel in the comment section of who thinks Donald Trump's going to win the election and by what margin, popular vote and by state. So in the end, my prediction is the map stays exactly the same as 2016. That Donald Trump wins 306 electoral college votes, and Biden wins 232. Based upon early voting, Nevada's within striking distance. Both campaigns were in Minnesota. Minnesota's within striking distance. It wouldn't surprise me at all. Like, let's put it this way. We know we're going to have results in Nevada. We're going to have results in Minnesota, most likely. We're going to have results in Florida. We're going to have results in North Carolina, Ohio, Iowa. If Donald Trump sweeps Florida, North Carolina, Ohio, Iowa, and he looks like he might be picking up Minnesota and or Nevada, election's over. It's Donald Trump's. Everyone's expecting it to go the other way. They're expecting once we start counting votes in Florida that Donald Trump is going to, look like he's going to lose Florida, look like he's going to lose North Carolina. If that's the case, if that is truly what's happening, if Donald Trump is losing Florida and North Carolina, it's over for Trump. So just to give you some heads up. But nonetheless, my prediction, 306 to 232. Final prediction. And as always, thank you for watching. Make sure you spread this around, share it with friends, and don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you next video. Thank you.